TCU has to add one and possibly two linebackers in the spring transfer portal window.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 seasons. Thank you for making Locked On Horned Frogs your first listen. TCU has to add at least one linebacker, I think two linebackers, in the spring transfer portal window. We've been doing this series over the past few weeks where I go position by position. And I say, yes, TCU set here. They don't need to add anybody else, or they need some help. Quick rundown, quarterback, no, you're good. Running back, I would add one more player. Receiver, I think you're good. O-line, I would add an interior offensive lineman and a tackle. For clarity's sake, when I talk about linebackers, I'm not talking about stud linebackers. Andy Avalos and this new defensive system that he brought over last season. They moved from a 3-3-5. Technically, if you want to talk about the base set of the Andy Avalos defense, it's also a 3-3-5 scheme, but you have a lot more 4 and 5 lineman sets. These stud linebackers, they're not your traditional hand-in-the-ground defensive linemen, but they're still pass rushers. In the majority of their snaps, they're either rushing the passer or they have a run game responsibility. They're not dropping out into coverage. So for the sake of the episodes, I'm going to lump stud linebackers into the defensive line category because I think they align more with that spot than the inside linebacker spot. So today we're talking about inside linebackers, or your Will linebacker and your Mike linebacker, which this is a place where there's a lot of transition happening. Johnny Hodges has played a lot of snaps for TCU for the past 3 seasons. He's moving on. When they added Johnny a few off seasons ago, that first year Sonny Dykes was here, honestly, he was a godsend because they needed somebody to take over that leadership position, bring some physicality to that linebacker spot, and he did that. Now, as his career went on, other coaches, other offenses realized, hey, we can isolate Johnny Hodges in coverage situations and create favorable matchups for our skill players, and that hurt TCU's defense at times. He's now leaving, and bottom line is somebody who had a lot of experience and took a lot of those snaps for you the past few seasons is gone. They also had some attrition in the transfer portal. Shad Banks, who was one of those guys that, man, you just really hoped he could figure it out. The last few off seasons I've talked about, if Shad can stay healthy and if the light really fully comes on for him, he's going to be a special player. He just has that unique athleticism that you can't teach. It never worked out, right? Kylan Salter didn't see the field a lot. He's also moving on to greener pastures, going to go somewhere else. He hit the transfer portal. Nnamdi Obaizor is coming back along with Caleb Alarmzor. I think those two guys will be your starters. Caleb Alarmzor, if you remember, when he was landed by TCU in the portal this past offseason, Ohio State was the other team in the mix. Now, it's always hard to kind of get a feel for how interested everybody is, but Ohio State was at least interested enough that they were ready to have him in on a visit. He was Cal's leading tackler 2 years ago. I thought he would get more run last year. When he was on the field, he made things happen. He's very good at blitzing the quarterback. You also see that downhill physicality that you would want from your traditional kind of middle linebacker, able to read keys well, good gap integrity, get down there and play with run fits, but also brings more athleticism to that linebacker spot, and I think allows you to do some different things in coverage that have sort of plagued you over the last few years. Nnamdi, super experienced player. Now, he hasn't really been able to replicate the magic he found 2 years ago, but another offseason to continue to learn, grow, get better. I think he'll be a solid starter for this team next season. Behind those guys, you don't have a ton of depth. Now, it's only, 2 spots, but Max Carroll is a player that I would expect to at least compete for a starting job. I hope that's the case. Max was a guy in limited moments that made an impression last year. One thing I love about Max is he's been a special teams ace for the past few seasons. He's always down there on kickoff, either making a tackle or being involved in the play. I also love that I feel like every time I look up and I see him on special teams, he's jawing at somebody. I need my linebackers to have a little bit of juice. That's a spot where I want somebody who's a little crazy, who's ready to fight, who's ready to scrap. Max Carroll brings that mentality to the field. He's been very good and very physical on special teams over the last few years. And he played a number of snaps in that Kansas game this past season, did a good job. It's always kind of dangerous to evaluate people in those limited moments because the other team doesn't always know what to prepare for. There is a feel of like somebody's coming in with a lot of energy and enthusiasm because they haven't played a ton of reps. They're excited. They're fresh. So I want to see Max on a week-to-week basis what he can do. But I think there's a lot of potential there. The other two guys, if the season started today, will be true freshmen. Sam Haley, who comes in from Tennessee, and then Dylan Arkansas, a linebacker from Denton Ryan. I like both of these players. Dylan is one of the many guys in this class who just made things happen at the highest level of Texas high school football. He played for Denton Ryan over the past few seasons. He tackled everything in his sight. He's a little undersized, I think, to be a college linebacker, but I feel like he'll be able to grow into his frame and do a good job. Sam Haley, same kind of thing. Played in Tennessee, did a great job there, had a great high school career. Now, they recruited a couple other guys. John Schobel was a middle linebacker at Columbus, but all accounts are that they recruited him as an edge player. So if you have anybody else step up outside of those players, it's going to be someone who's technically a walk-on, which that happens from time to time. But of the list here that's on the roster, Luke Lingard is really the only player that's had some significant experience, and still even that's in 3 or 4 games within a season. So is he a good kind of depth piece to have? Yes, but I don't think Luke is someone who they're going to count on for a lot of snaps. You need to go add 1 or 2 players here. Namdi's been banged up in the past. I don't really know what Caleb Alarm's-Or injury history is, if there is any. But even with only having 2 spots there, you got to have a pretty solid 3 deep. And right now, I think if the season started, you'd have Namdi, Caleb, Max Carroll behind one of those guys, and then possibly a true freshman like Sam Haley backing up the other player. That doesn't make a ton of sense. You need more depth here. And I don't even necessarily think you need a starter. Now, I'm always for competition. So if you can go find somebody who can push Caleb and Namdi for that starting spot, that's significant. And I think that's something that's a chance you need to take. But overall, I feel like this is more about finding serviceable guys who, if they were called upon, could do a good job and give you quality depth. Because the bottom line is, too, like, you're going to be this is a spot we're going to be rotating. Like, Caleb played a good amount of snaps last year. I think Max Carroll now slides into that spot where, okay, maybe you're not a starter, even though I feel like he's going to have a chance to compete for it. But if anybody's banged up, he'll immediately slide in there. Also, in different possessions during the game, will put you in the ball game, allow you to do some work, get some fresh legs out there, get some different eyes out there, and see how it goes. But this is a spot where you got to add a few players because I don't think you want – I feel like Sam Haley and Dylan Arkansas are both players with a bright future. I don't doubt they can eventually be really good contributors. I'm just not sold that you want them right away stepping in and having to play a lot of snaps. So to combat that, you go get some help. And the guys that you were sort of counting on to be in that role – like Shad Banks, like Kalen Salter, they're moving on elsewhere. So you have to supplement that with other players. I am very intrigued to see what TCU's recruiting strategy is like, both in the portal and in the high school ranks for these specific spots. Because at stud linebacker, it's a very cut and dry position. You know the type of person you need there. High-end athleticism. Somebody who can rush the passer, get to the edge, make things happen. And you want versatility at this spot, but at the same time, you need those kind of old school, looks like they need to wear a neck roll type of linebackers. And I think Caleb Alarm's-Or definitely fits that. Max Carroll could too. Namdi has some position flex. Like, he played safety in the past. All these players, though, should be really comfortable. I mean, the good news is your starters that you're kind of penciling in at the moment have played in this defense for a season. Both of them stayed healthy. So they have a good feel for what they need to do and what the vibe's going to be like, what the calls are going to be, and all those things moving forward. I have high expectations for this defense. Now, you got to go execute, but we'll talk about the secondary over the next few days too. At corner, there's a number of good players, and you also have Avery Helm coming back from an injury, who was supposed to be your number one dude last year. Safety, you've been able to keep pretty much everyone. You're led by Bud Clark, who's played like a million snaps. It's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not much of one. And then D-line wise, it needs to come together, but it feels like you have a good mix of returning production along with some exciting young players that, in theory, should work out really well where you can get after the passer. And I've said this before, the most important thing when we talk about defenses disrupting an offense, can you get in the quarterback's face? Can you hit him? And can you make plays? And so that's going to be a huge key for this TCU defense this upcoming season. When we come back, an update on the TCU spring game. Also, we'll get into a big opportunity for TCU men's basketball tonight that's coming up next on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Taxes, everybody has to do them. You might be dreading it. It's just something you got to get done, though. This is a message from our sponsor, Inuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back. Now taxes is just easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched your unique tax situation, an expert who's backed by the latest technology and can cross-check millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while going about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is taxes, Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. TurboTax. Check them out. Do it today. Big-time opportunity for TCU men's basketball to improve their resume against a top 10 ranked team tonight. Before we get to that, though, one fun thing about doing this show, you never really know who's watching or listening, and sometimes people chime in with the information. So this is courtesy of Ashley Jackson, who I believe is Travis Jackson's mom. Travis Jackson, true freshman defensive lineman last year, had a really good season, made some plays, had an interception in that Oklahoma State game, I believe. She said no spring game this year, just letting y'all know. This is something that we talked about, I think it was last week. Matt Rule came out and he said, look, spring games, they're going to become things of the past. And everybody is going to take a look at this and evaluate it and see how to move forward. Nebraska's not doing it this year. And traditionally, this is a really big deal at Nebraska. It's a blue blood program. I know lately it hasn't been that way from a results standpoint, but you guys know what I mean. Very passionate fan base. They always pack it out. They had over 60,000 people show up last year. They put it on the Big Ten Network. It's a big deal. Well, they're not doing it this season. And the reason that Matt Rule gave, I mean, it's kind of sad, but it's the world we live in college football now. He's like, look, I'm not going to give people an opportunity to scout my players and try to poach them. Whether that's young players that I'm counting on next year or current starters that I have, I'm not putting this on tape. I'm not putting it on TV because it's just become the Wild West of things. And he wasn't begrudging the people that try to poach because the bottom line is everybody does this, but he wasn't going to give people that opportunity. Looks like TCU will follow suit. Now, that hasn't been confirmed officially, but that's just, scuttlebutt. And I'm not surprised. Honestly, if you've been to the game in person, it's a little different. If you watched on TV the last few years, the ESPN Plus broadcast of the spring game, they don't show a whole lot anyway. It's, a couple plays, and then it's an interview with Brian Estridge and somebody. And again, I understand why. Part of it is, all that stuff is archived. So people can scout your players also. There's, for better or worse, they're seeing some of the things you're going to do. Now, I think it's a problem. One, it's unfortunate for college football fans because that's the one chance we really get to see these guys in person, see them play. But also, I was actually talking about this on the radio today. I did a guest spot, and the host was like, what do you do in like if you're a team with a quarterback battle? TCU's fortunate in that they don't really have to worry about that. Josh Hoover's going to be their guy. But not everybody's in that spot. If you're a team with a QB battle, yeah, you can evaluate those things in practice. Of course you can. But you also want to see as much as you can simulate it in a real game-like situation where, things are flying real. How do they process things? How do they evaluate it? Do they make good decisions? Are they immediately bailing out of the pocket, right? Like, these are all things that you want to see in a more controlled environment in a game-like situation. Well, if you're not in a spring game, you can't do that. But at least according to one of the parents of a TCU player, no spring game this upcoming spring practice season. TCU basketball, the men. It's been an up and down year, but they're 7-7 in conference play. Noah Reynolds hits a big three against Arizona State on the road on Saturday night. But the story of that ball game, Jace Posey, 20 points, just doing it all. And Jace has been a guy that's given them solid minutes all year long, but really upped his game scoring the basketball on Saturday. They've got 6 conference games left. They play Texas Tech at home tonight. Tech is the number 9 team in the country. 7 p.m. tip. This crew is not on the bubble right now, but this is a huge opportunity. If you go beat Texas Tech, a top 10 ranked team, then suddenly I think you're in the mix. I'm not saying you're in or you're a lock or anything like that, but I still am holding out hope. I know the Big 12 is not as strong as it used to be, and now you don't have the round robin, so everybody's schedule is kind of unbalanced and it's different. And for the most part, TCU has beaten up on teams that are towards the bottom of the league. Their most impressive wins to this point in conference play on the road against Baylor, and then I guess West Virginia at home. If I'm making an egregious mistake there, please let me know. But they don't have a signature win. This will be a signature win. And they played Tech pretty well in Lubbock. I mean, they didn't win the ball game, but they were in it until about the 5-minute mark in the second half. I'm expecting a good crowd. I hope it's loud in the Shally. And if you pull off an upset, suddenly you're over 500 in conference play, you have a signature win. It doesn't put you in, but it at least gets you in the discussion. They get Cincinnati this weekend, West Virginia on the road, UCF at home, Baylor at home, and then close the season with Colorado. I think every game on the schedule is winnable. I don't feel like they're going to win every game on it. I'm not predicting that they will. But I just mean there's no game on that schedule that you look at and you say, oh, man, on paper, there's no chance. On the road, Morgantown's going to be tough. And that's a West Virginia team that almost took them down at home. At home against Baylor's going to be tough. Baylor's playing better basketball than they were a month ago when TCU played them. They're actually playing Arizona right now. 9 p.m. tip in Waco for some crazy reason. I mean, I know it's for TV, but still it's wild that they tipped off at 9 p.m. But there's things in front of them here. And if you go win this ball game tonight, suddenly you sort of open the door to some cool possibilities. On the women's side, the women don't play until Wednesday. They'll play Arizona State on the road. But a development that happened today, Kansas State and West Virginia played at 1 p.m. this afternoon. West Virginia won that ball game. K-State now has 3 conference losses. TCU is tied with Baylor with 2 conference losses. Now, technically, they have the tiebreaker right now. What it means is it's going to be tough. TCU's got games against Arizona State, West Virginia at home, Houston, and then Baylor on the road. But with 4 games left, TCU controls their own destiny. If they win out, they'll win the Big 12. It's going to be tough to go 4-0, but if they can do it, they'll be the Big 12 champions. What an incredible turnaround. A year ago, we were talking about this team struggling to have enough players to play a full game. And when they were fully healthy last year, they were a solid team. West Virginia's good. The Frogs get them at home this upcoming Sunday at 11 a.m. And then that Baylor game's your regular season finale. And hopefully that's a conference title ball game. But just an outstanding job of Mark Campbell. I thought they played well on Sunday. Madison Connor looked good. I forgot that was a Madison Connor revenge game. She came over from Arizona. But she had some big-time threes. They got contributions from Aaliyah Robertson again. She's been fantastic. Sedona Prince had a good game. They handled the ball pressure better. I mean, it's still something they're going to have to watch out for and figure out, but they seem to have a better handle on it in that game against the Wildcats. So you're starting to see that strategy that everybody's employed against TCU fizzle out a little bit. Now, West Virginia, they pressure the ball all the time. So there's some concern that, maybe they could do some similar things to K-State. But it's tough. Bottom line is you got a chance to go do it. And, that's all you can really ask for with 4 games left in the regular season. TCU baseball, they have swept San Diego, and they start the season 4-0. Frogs take down the San Diego Toros by a final score of 7-6 this afternoon. Cole Kramer, who is a transfer from Wazoo, hit 2 home runs today, including a go-ahead home run solo shot in the top of the 9th to take that 7-6 lead. Luis Rodriguez was really good out of the bullpen this afternoon. He threw 3 innings, struck out 7 batters. Your starter tonight was a true freshman, and Zach James. He ended up giving up 4 runs on 6 hits in 2 2/3 innings. He was really pounding the strike zone. That's what I noticed. I liked his approach. Had some bad luck. Couldn't really close out innings. Had a couple of innings where he got the 2 outs and just couldn't get it done. There were also a million reviews in this ball game. San Diego is a good team. I don't know how good they're going to be this year. I know last year they were a good team, I guess I should say. They won over 40 games last season. They're projected to be a 3 seed. Field of 64 projections at the beginning of the year, always kind of insane. But they're projected to be a force in the West Coast Conference. And TCU went on the road and won the game. They showed some power this weekend. I believe they hit 11 home runs. Noah Franco hit 2 on Sunday. And he had some freshman struggles as well. But, man, those were some bombs that he hit. 450 feet. One of those went. Isaac Cadena, the transfer from Ohio State, he hit a couple home runs. He also had a double today. He looked good swinging the bat. A lot of young players and a lot of new faces. But with that being said, I thought they handled themselves really well in this 4-game series. They got down 4-1 in this ball game, but it was a getaway day, and you just kind of had the feeling like, all right, if they can hang around here, they're eventually going to turn the tide and get to this pitcher. Now, things ramp up big time next weekend. They play at Globe Life against Arkansas and Michigan. 2 great programs. So we'll get a feel for who they really are then. I'm curious to see this lineup against some better pitching because I liked what they did this weekend, but I don't feel like San Diego has the depth to really keep up and do what TCU or do the kind of things that TCU is going to see on a week-to-week basis in the Big 12. But to TCU's credit, they took advantage of it and got it done. Frogs win. They are 4-0. Quick tennis note. TCU men's tennis in the semifinals of the indoor tournament. It's going on as we speak. I know they took the doubles point from Stanford, but they have a chance to potentially once again play for a national title in indoor tennis, which they have done, I believe, the last 3 seasons and won 2 of those. And then in yesterday's show, I talked about keeping the iron skillet going because now that SMU is in the ACC and it's a Power 4 opponent, it makes a lot more sense to continue to play that game. Frog fan says, I hope they keep it. Also, who will be SMU's main rival? If it's over, keep the skillet home in Fort Worth, Texas. So one part of that, this game's big, man. You want to win this ball game because you don't want to be the team that ends the series and then also loses bragging rights until the next time these 2 inevitably meet up, whenever that's going to be. As far as SMU's main rivals go, I don't know who it's going to be in the ACC. Geographically, there's nobody that really makes sense. And we'll see how consistent they are. But, that's part of the rub with realignment is you lose a lot of those great rivalries. Matt George says TCU wants an out-of-conference schedule to be Power 4, Group of 5, and FCS teams, keeping the SMU game. We either have the same Power 4 team each year or 10 Power 4 games in one season. Play it on a home and away series every 5 years maybe. It's not going to be an every-year thing. We need to get some variety and see some different teams. Yeah, I understand that. You're right. Ultimately, they don't want to play 2 Power 4 games in your non-conference schedule. And, yes, it would be 10 Power 4 games over the course of the season. Maybe they could do it every other year. 5 years to me feels too spread out. But, yes, that's why it's happening, along with the fact that TCU just wants an extra home game. And, as much as I would love to see some high-profile opponents here on a yearly basis, I think, unfortunately, it's going to be mainly group of 5 opponents coming to Fort Worth to play them so that they can hopefully get a victory and also make some money with ticket sales out of the deal as well. And Vince Pryor says, at what point do I say I told you so? Historic rivalries are always good locally. That's what matters. Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. I personally think keeping the series now is more about it makes sense for TCU from a relevancy standpoint. But yes, also keeping that rivalry going, I think, is a good thing for both programs. And I was on the fence about it for a long time, but now I'm like, yeah, I think you just need to keep it going and see what happens. We'll be back tomorrow. We're definitely going to keep this podcast going. It's Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or on your favorite podcast platform.